They laughed when she pushed dead sticks into the mud. 12 men stood at the fence line that April morning in 1952. Farmers with sunburned necks and dirt under their nails. They laughed until their bellies shook. Because Hazel Ainsworth was 19 years old, barely 5'2", and she was out there in the flooded bottomland behind her grandmother's crumbling farmhouse, pushing bare gray twigs into 6 inches of black mud and standing water. 300 sticks, 300 dead, leafless, lifeless sticks, pulled from a rotting bundle she'd found in her grandmother's attic. Tied with twine, so old it turned to powder in her hands. Her own father turned his back and walked away without a single word. The county extension agent wrote her a formal warning, told her she was violating every principle known to modern agriculture. The richest farmer in 3 counties, a man named Cyrus offered her pennies for the land and told her to take the money before she starved. But Hazel kept planting. She planted until her fingers went numb, until the rain mixed with the tears on her face and no one could tell the difference. She planted because she had nowhere else to go, nothing else to lose. And because the note tucked inside, that rotting bundle, written in her grandmother's dying hand, had said just 7 words. Plant them in the mud. Trust the water. 6 months later, the whole county came begging for her secret. But to understand why a teenage girl would risk everything on a bundle of dead sticks, you have to understand what she had already lost. Hollow Creek County, Illinois. That's where this story lives. A patch of flat, stubborn land tucked between the Sangamon River and the old railroad line. Nothing much to look at. Corn in the summer, snow in the winter, mud in between. The kind of place a young person dreams of leaving. And a young person did. Once. That young person was Hazel. She was 8 years old the last time she saw her parents alive. March 1941. Cold gray morning. Her mother had kissed her forehead and left a lipstick print on her skin. Her father had ruffled her hair and promised to bring her back a peppermint stick from Chicago. They were taking the noon train up for a wedding. Her mother's cousin, some girl Hazel had never met. Hazel stayed with her grandmother that weekend. The train never came back. A freight car had jumped its track outside Bloomington. 23 people died. Her parents were 2 of them. Hazel found out because her grandmother sat down on the kitchen floor and cried without making a sound. And Hazel was old enough to know that grown-ups don't sit on floors. Not unless something has broken forever. After that, it was just her and Della. Della Ainsworth, 63 years old at the time, widowed since 1918. A woman who wore men's boots to work in her garden and kept a shotgun by the back door and made the best blackberry pie in 3 counties. The other women in the church circle called her a witch behind her back. The men tolerated her because her late husband had died a hero at Below Wood, and because nobody wanted to be the first to say something mean to a woman who could shoot a copperhead from 30 feet. Della raised Hazel on that 60 acres of Hollow Creek bottomland. Taught her to read from a Bible with the front cover missing. Taught her to milk a goat. Taught her to bake bread. Taught her the names of every wildflower that grew along the creek bank. But she never taught her about the sticks in the attic. Not once. Not a word. In 11 years. Hazel was smart. Everyone said so. The kind of smart that didn't fit in a place like Hollow Creek. She won a scholarship to the University of Illinois in 1951. She was going to be a teacher. She was going to leave. Della had cried when Hazel got the letter. Cried and laughed at the same time. Said her Thaddeus would have been proud. Said the whole family had been waiting on someone like Hazel for 4 generations. Hazel went to Champaign that fall. She stayed in a boarding house on Wright Street. She wore a wool coat 2 sizes too big. She wrote her grandmother a letter every Sunday. Then February came. The letter that came back wasn't from Della. It was from Ophelia Whitcomb, the neighbor woman across the creek. 3 lines in shaky handwriting. Your grandmother has taken sick. Doctor says pneumonia. Come home if you can. Hazel came home.
Della laste de 11 days.
She didn't say much at the end. Her lungs sounded like wet paper. But on the last morning, she looked at Hazel, with clear eyes for the first time in a week, and squeezed her hand. The attic, she whispered. When the water rises. The bundle. Hazel leaned closer. Bundle of what, Grandma?
Della smiled.
A small, tired, secret smile. The Willows, she said. And then she was gone. They buried Della on the hill behind the house. Same spot where Thaddeus had been buried 34 years earlier. Empty coffin for him, of course. His body was still somewhere in a field in France. But Della had wanted the marker there anyway. Said she liked knowing they were together on the same hill even, if only one of them was really underneath it. 12 people came to the funeral. 12. In a county where Della had lived for 74 years. Where she had baked pies for weddings and sat up with sick babies and pulled women out of ditches when their husbands got mean. 12 people, and half of them were there for the food after. Hazel stood at the graveside in a black dress that had belonged to her mother. It was too long. It dragged in the mud. She didn't care. Her father came. Edmund Ainsworth, 42 years old. Tall, thin, gray at the temples. A man who worked at the grain elevator in town and had not spoken to his own mother in 22 years. He stood on the far side of the grave, and he did not look at Hazel. Not once. Not when the pastor spoke. Not when they lowered the box. Not when the first shovel of dirt hit the wood. He left before the last hymn. Hazel walked back to the house alone. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, and she looked at the paperwork the bank had given her. $2,400. That was the mortgage. Her grandmother had somehow kept it current for 34 years. On egg money, on pie money, on whatever a widow woman could scrape together in a place where nobody would hire her. $2,400. And 50 days to find it. Hazel had $93 in her savings account. She laid her forehead down on the kitchen table, and she stayed there for a very long time. The bank man was named Roland Hemmings. He came out on a Tuesday, wore a brown suit, carried a leather portfolio. He didn't take his hat off when Hazel opened the door. Miss Ainsworth, he said. He said it like her name was a small, unpleasant thing he wanted to set down and back away from. Hazel let him in, made him coffee, watched him look around her grandmother's kitchen, with the eyes of a man mentally cataloging what he would need to sell. The situation is straightforward, he told her. The property is in arrears. The estate is not liquid. You have 50 days, from the date of your grandmother's passing to make good on the outstanding balance. Otherwise, the bank will initiate foreclosure proceedings. Hazel nodded. She held her coffee cup, with both hands to keep them from shaking. I understand, she said. Now, there is one other option, which is, Mr. Thorne, Cyrus Thorne, has expressed interest in acquiring the parcel. His offer would cover the mortgage in full. You would walk away without debt. How much would I get? Hemmings cleared his throat. Nothing above the mortgage, I'm afraid. The land's condition. The house's condition. You understand. Hazel understood. She understood that Cyrus Thorne wanted her grandmother's land for pennies. She understood that the bank was helping him. She understood that in 50 days she would be homeless, penniless, and the last living thing that carried Della Ainsworth's name. She stood up. Thank you for coming, Mr. Hemmings. He blinked. Miss Ainsworth, I would strongly encourage you, thank you for coming. He left. Hazel stood in the kitchen a long time after his car pulled away. Then she went out to the porch and she sat down on the steps, and she cried the way you cry when nobody's watching. Ugly. Loud, head between her knees, the kind of cry that comes from a place so deep you didn't know it was there. She was still crying when the old man came up the lane. He walked slow, like his knees hurt, like every step was a decision. Hazel didn't hear him at first. When she finally looked up, he was already at the bottom of the porch steps. A thin man in a worn black coat, gray beard, eyes the color of creek water in October. I'm sorry to intrude, he said. I was looking for the Ainsworth place. You found it. He nodded, twisted his hat in his hands. And are you Hazel? Then I'm your uncle, he said. Sort of. My name is Silas Beaumont. Your grandmother was my cousin. Second cousin. But we were raised close. Hazel wiped her face with the back of her hand. She didn't remember him. She had never heard his name. You'd better come inside, she said. She made him coffee too. He drank it black. He sat at Della's kitchen table like he had sat there before, which it turned out he had. Many times. A long time ago. He looked at Hazel a long moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket, and he set an envelope on the table between them. 2,400, he said. Cash. Hazel stared at it. I don't understand. For the mortgage.
Della S mortgage.
I know the bank is squeezing you. I heard about it in town yesterday. So I came. Where did you get this? I sold my farm. Hazel felt the room tilt. You did what? 80 acres. Over in Piatt County. I sold it Monday. To a man named Grissom. He paid cash. That's the cash. Mr. Beaumont. Silas. Please. Silas. I can't take this. That's your whole life. The old man looked at her, with those October Creek eyes, and he smiled a very small, very tired smile. Your grandmother was my life, he said. Before she was anybody else's. Before she was Thaddeus's wife or your father's mother or your grandmother. When we were 15 and 16, she was mine. I asked her to marry me in 1908. She said no. She loved another man. She loved him better, which is fair, which is right, which is how things are supposed to go. But I never stopped being her family, Hazel. Not in the way she was mine. He stopped, cleared his throat. I offered her money 3 times over the years. When Thaddeus died. When the depression hit. When your father cut ties with her. Every time she said no. Della didn't want to owe anybody anything. Especially not me. She said it wouldn't be fair to my wife. Which was a kind way of saying she didn't want to hurt me by making me hope for something that was never coming. He looked at the envelope on the table. But she can't say no anymore. Hazel could not speak. I'm not doing this for you, he said gently. Forgive me. I'm doing this for a promise I made to a girl in a hayfield in 1908. Promise she never asked me to keep. Take the money. Pay the bank. Save the land. That's all I want. Hazel put her hand over her mouth. She was crying again. She hadn't stopped crying since Della died. She was starting to wonder if she ever would. Where will you go? She whispered. Boarding house in Danville. I've got enough left for a room. I'll be fine. You'll stay here. Silas shook his head. No, child. This is your house. You need to grow into it alone. That's the only way it becomes yours. But I'll come by. Promise. When you need me, just say the word. He stood, put his hat back on, walked to the door. Then he stopped and turned around. Your grandmother, before I go, did she leave you anything? Any papers? Any letters? Anything strange? Hazel thought about it. Not that I've found. Silas nodded slowly. Look in the attic, he said. The attic was hot even in April. Hazel climbed the narrow stairs, with a broom in one hand and a kerosene lamp in the other. The floorboards creaked. Dust hung in the light beams like it had been waiting for her. 60 years of accumulated life. Boxes of letters. Broken chairs. A wedding dress in a garment bag. A cradle her grandfather had built. A trunk of children's clothes that must have been her father's. She almost missed it. The cedar chest sat in the far corner under a moth-eaten quilt. She pulled the quilt off, and the smell that rose was rosemary and dust and something older. Something green and sleeping. Inside the chest, wrapped in oilcloth. The bundle. 300 sticks. 2 feet long. Thick as a woman's finger. Gray-brown bark. Dry as bone. Bound in twine. So old it crumbled when she touched it. And a note, folded once. Yellow with age. Her grandmother's spidery handwriting. Plant them in the mud when the creek rises. Trust the water. Under the sticks at the bottom of the chest, a small leather book. Hazel lifted it out with hands that had gone strangely cold. She sat down on the attic floor. She opened the book, and she began to read. The first entry was dated May 1894. Her grandmother had been 16 years old. Today I met the old woman by the creek. She lives in a shack near the second bend past the hollow. Papa says stay away from her, but Mama says she is harmless. Her name is Winona Redfeather. She is very old. She was already old when Mama was a girl. She showed me the willows she planted along her run. She said her mother taught her. She said her mother's mother taught her mother. She said this knowledge belongs to women who know how to listen to the ground. She said someday, if I have the courage, I will plant them too. I don't know what she meant. Hazel turned the page. June 1894. I went back today. Winona gave me a bundle of cuttings. She said soak them 3 days in rainwater. Plant them 12 inches deep in standing water. Full sun. Wait. She said the water is not the enemy of the willow. The water is the mother. I don't understand, but I wrote it down. August 1894. Winona died last week. Nobody in town noticed. I went to her shack, and there was nothing left. Just the willows. They are so tall now. Taller than her cabin. I took a few cuttings home, and I hid them in the barn. October 1894. Papa found the cuttings. He burned them. He said I am not to speak of that woman again. He said she was a heathen and a witch. I did not tell him about the bundle I hid in the loft. Hazel's hands were shaking. She flipped forward. Years. Decades. The handwriting getting steadier, then thinner, then shakier again, as her grandmother aged. Thaddeus is away with the guard. I planted 12 cuttings along the low corner of the north field, where the water always stands. Nobody will notice. I want to see if she was right. They are growing. Every single one. The ground under them is changing. I can feel it with my hands. It is darker, softer. I pulled them up. I don't know why. Yes, I do. I am afraid. Mrs. Peebles came by yesterday and asked what those trees were. I said switchgrass. She looked at me strange. I pulled them up that night by lantern light. I threw them in the creek. I cried the whole time. Hazel stopped reading. She looked around the attic. At 60 years of one woman's life. At a bundle of dead sticks that had waited 6 decades for someone brave enough to plant them. She turned to the last page. The handwriting was almost illegible. Written in the last week of her grandmother's life. Written from a bed she never got out of. Hazel. My Hazel. If you are reading this, then I am gone. Forgive me. I was a coward. 58 years I have carried the willows in that chest. 58 years I have been afraid of what people would say. Winona was right. I know it. I proved it in 1913, and I threw it away because I was afraid. Don't be afraid like me. The land is not what people think. The water is not the enemy. If you have to sell the farm, sell it. But before you do, plant them. Plant every last one of them. Do it for me. Do it for Winona. Do it for whatever girl comes after you. Because it cannot end with a coward like me. I love you more than the whole flat sky. Grandma. Hazel sat in the attic for a long time. The lamp burned down. The light in the dormer window turned gold. Then orange. Then red. She was still sitting there when the creek water started rising outside. She could hear it through the open window. That slow, patient, hungry sound of water finding new places to go. She stood up. She picked up the bundle. She went downstairs. The men at the co-op heard about it by Thursday. Word traveled fast in a place like Hollow Creek. It always did, especially when the word was worth laughing at. Della Ainsworth's granddaughter is planting sticks in the bottomland. They said it around the pot-bellied stove. They said it at the feed counter. They said it standing in line at the post office. Sticks? Dead sticks. In the flooded field? The one that never dries out. The one that killed old Thaddeus's corn crop back in 10. That one. Well, poor thing. Her grandmother must have addled her brain. They laughed. Not cruel laughter, most of it. Just the loose, easy laughter of men who had never known real trouble and could not imagine a 19-year-old girl standing alone in 6 inches of mud, with nothing left in the world but a bundle of dead wood. Some of the laughter was crueler. Cyrus Thorne, for one, 60 years old, owned 1,200 acres, wore a Stetson hat even in the rain, had wanted the Hollow Creek bottomland for a decade because it bordered his own property and would give him direct access to the river. He had tried to buy it from Della 3 separate times. She had told him no every time. The last time she had told him to get off her porch and stay off. He had not forgotten. Now he stood at the co-op counter and he smiled a slow smile and he said, well, looks like that piece of land is going to fall in my lap after all. Give her 30 days. She'll be begging me to take it. The men around him nodded. Only one man did not laugh. Warren Ashcroft, the county extension agent, 48 years old, thin, balding, thick glasses, the kind of man who kept his fingernails clean and his shirts pressed and his opinions filed alphabetically. Warren did not laugh because Warren did not find things funny. He found them accurate or inaccurate, and Hazel Ainsworth's project was, in his professional judgment, deeply, dangerously inaccurate. He drove out to Hollow Creek the next morning. He wore his gum boots. He carried his clipboard. He waded into the flooded field with the careful, deliberate motion of a man performing a public service in an unpleasant environment. He examined one of the sticks with a magnifying glass. He examined another. Then he waded back to where Hazel stood on the higher ground at the edge of the field, in her grandmother's old canvas jacket, with her hair tied back with a piece of baling twine. Miss Ainsworth, he said, adjusting his glasses. Mr. Ashcroft, these appear to be Salix alba cuttings. White willow, ornamental variety, possibly an heirloom cultivar. They show no signs of viable cambium activity. The bark is desiccated. The nodes are dormant. Planting them in anaerobic conditions like this, in standing water with no drainage. You are looking at complete necrosis inside of 2 weeks. He paused, looked at her over the top of his glasses. And even if they were viable, white willow requires specific soil pH. This soil, he consulted his clipboard, this soil is heavy alluvial clay with poor percolation. It is the worst possible medium for root establishment. I am telling you this because I would tell my own daughter this. Hazel looked at him a long moment. My grandmother grew prize roses in this soil, she said quietly. Blue ribbons at the state fair. For years running. Roses are not willows. I know. And prize roses are not 60 acres of bottomland. I know that too. Warren sighed. Miss Ainsworth, I am not your enemy. I am trying to save you from a costly mistake. The county has resources. There are programs. If you would let me help you, I don't need help planting. I am officially advising you to remove the cuttings. I'll take that under advisement. He looked at her another moment. Then he nodded once, tucked his clipboard under his arm, and slogged back toward his car. He stopped at his door and turned around. For what it's worth, he said, I liked your grandmother. She once brought me a pie when my wife was sick. I never forgot it. Then thank you for the visit, Mr. Ashcroft. He drove away. Hazel stood there in the mud until his car was out of sight. Then she walked back down into the field and she picked up where she had left off. Another cutting. Then another. Then another. Her father came the next day. Edmund Ainsworth stood at the edge of the field in his good work shoes, which were now ruined. He didn't seem to notice. He looked at the sticks. Then he looked at his daughter. And his face did something that would have been easier to bear if it had just been anger. It was pity. Hazel, he said. Just her name. Nothing else. She waded out of the mud toward him. Grandma left me a note. She left me the sticks. She said to plant them. Edmund closed his eyes. Your grandmother was a good woman, Hazel. But she had notions. Superstitions. Ideas from another century. Those sticks are dead. Look at them. They are dead wood. You cannot plant dead wood in standing water and expect anything but rot. Then they'll rot. Hazel, please, I'll have tried, Daddy. I'll have done something, instead of sitting in that house watching the bank take it all. Her father rubbed his face with both hands. He looked so tired. He looked 10 years older than he was. The bank man came already, he said. Yes. And Silas Beaumont paid the mortgage. Edmund went very still. What did you say? He sold his farm. He paid off the mortgage in full. The house is mine now, and the land, and the taxes, and the debt is gone. Her father stared at her. Silas Beaumont. Yes. Sold his farm. Yes. For you. For Grandma. He said he owed her. Edmund made a sound that was almost a laugh. Not a happy laugh. The other kind. Of course he did, he said quietly. Of course he did. That old fool never got over her. Hazel didn't know what to say to that. Edmund looked out at the field again. At the sticks. At the water. At the ruined bottomland that his mother had held onto through widowhood and drought and depression when everyone told her to sell it. You're just like her, he said. It didn't sound like a compliment. He turned and walked back to his truck. He did not come back for 3 weeks. The days after, that were the loneliest of Hazel's life. She had not known loneliness like it before. Not at school. Not even the first week after her parents died, when she had at least had Della. This was different. This was the loneliness of being 19 years old in a big empty farmhouse, with the wind whistling under every door, and the sound of your own footsteps echoing in rooms that used to have somebody in them. She ate cold biscuits standing at the counter. She slept in her grandmother's bed, because her own room felt too small. She walked the field every morning at dawn, and every evening at dusk. She talked to the sticks because there was nobody else to talk to. She told them about her grandmother. She told them about Silas. She told them about the way her father had said you're just like her. She told them that if they wanted to live, they had better hurry up. Because she was running out of things to believe in. The rain kept coming. The creek kept rising. By the second week, the water in the field was up to her thigh in places. The sticks were nearly submerged. Only the top showed, like the masts of a sunken fleet. Some nights she lay awake, and she was certain she had made a mistake. She was certain her grandmother had been a foolish old woman, with foolish old ideas. She was certain her father was right. She was certain Warren Ashcroft was right. She was certain the sticks were rotting under 6 inches of black water, and that in 2 weeks she would wait out there, and pull up a handful of mush, and she would know for sure that she had wasted her last chance on a dying woman's fantasy. Those nights she cried into her grandmother's pillow, but every morning she got up, and every morning she walked the field, and every morning she talked to the sticks. She could not have said why. Maybe because there was nothing else to do. Maybe because some part of her, the part that had climbed into Della's lap when she was 8 and had her hair brushed while Della hummed hymns, that part of her still believed. Ophelia Whitcomb came on a Wednesday. She was 68 years old. A widow. She lived alone in a small white house across the creek. Hazel had known her all her life, but not well. Ophelia had always been at Della's funeral in Hazel's mind, standing at the back, with her hands folded, saying nothing. She came up the lane carrying a basket. Inside the basket, half a loaf of bread, 6 brown eggs, a jar of preserves. Hazel opened the door and stared. Mrs. Whitcomb. Ophelia. Just Ophelia. I've been meaning to come over for 2 weeks and I kept losing my nerve. Please. Come in. They sat at the kitchen table. Hazel made tea because she was out of coffee. Ophelia looked around the kitchen a long moment. Her eyes went soft. I always loved this kitchen, she said. Your grandmother made me pancakes here once. Sat me down right there in that chair. It was 1932. My husband had just passed. I was 30 years younger than I am now, and I didn't think I would live through the winter. Hazel did not know that story. She fed me for a year, Ophelia said. Every Wednesday. Bread and preserves, and sometimes a cut of ham if she had it. She never called it charity. She would just show up on my porch and say, Ophelia, I made too much again. Would you take some of this off my hands? And I would take it, and I would eat it, and I would live 1 more week. Ophelia's eyes were wet now. She made me promise not to tell anyone. Not my sister. Not the pastor. Nobody. She said charity dies when it gets talked about. Hazel felt something loosen in her chest. I didn't know, she whispered. You weren't supposed to. She fed a lot of us, Hazel. There were 11 of us over the years that I know of. Widows, women whose husbands drank, women whose husbands hit them, a girl who came home from Chicago in trouble. Your grandmother helped every one of us. Nobody ever knew. That was how she wanted it. Hazel put her face in her hands. I don't want to make you cry, Ophelia said gently. I came to tell you something. What? I saw you out in that field last week. In the rain. And I said to myself, Ophelia, that is Della's grandchild. And whatever she is doing out there, Della would have wanted it done. And I said to myself, it is your turn to bring the bread. Hazel could not speak. Ophelia reached across the table and covered Hazel's hand with her own. Her hand was old and rough and warm. I don't know what you're doing with those sticks, she said. But I know Della. And if Della's granddaughter is out in the mud in the rain, then there is a reason. And I will be bringing you bread every Wednesday until either your field grows something or the sky falls in. Hazel began to cry. Ophelia sat with her for a long time. She did not say anything. She just held her hand. When she left, she said, I'll bring my granddaughter next time. Her name is Meredith. She's 10. She lost her mother 2 years back. She could use a little company. She'd be welcome. Ophelia nodded, started down the porch steps. Then she stopped. Hazel, one more thing. Yes? Don't listen to what people say about your grandmother being a witch.
Della wasn't a witch.
She was just a woman who paid attention. That's the scariest thing there is, to some people. A woman who pays attention. She walked down the lane. Hazel stood on the porch and watched her go. For the first time, since Della died, she felt something in her chest. That was not despair. It was small. It was quiet. It felt like a light left on in a window. Meredith came the following Wednesday. She was small for 10, thin as a fence rail, brown hair in 2 braids, freckles across her nose. She held Ophelia's hand tight and hid halfway behind her when Hazel opened the door. This is Meredith, Ophelia said. Meredith, this is Miss Hazel. Hello, Miss Hazel. Hello, Meredith. You want a biscuit? The child nodded, solemn as a judge. They sat in the kitchen. Meredith ate a biscuit with butter and honey. She did not speak. She watched Hazel with dark, serious eyes. After a while, Hazel said, Would you like to see the field? Meredith looked at her grandmother. Ophelia nodded. Yes, please, Meredith said. They walked down the slope together. The water had gone down a little. The sticks were still there. All of them. Still bare. Still gray. Meredith stood at the edge of the mud, and she looked at the sticks for a long time. Then she said, Do the trees feel bad? Hazel looked down at her. What do you mean, honey? Because they don't have leaves, and everybody laughs at them. Do they feel bad? Hazel felt something crack open in her chest. She knelt down in the wet grass, so she was eye to eye with the little girl. I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. But I'll tell you something my grandmother used to tell me. What? She said trees are patient. She said they know how to wait. She said the whole point of being a tree is knowing that spring always comes back, even when the winter is very, very long. Meredith thought about that. Do you believe her? Hazel did not answer right away. She looked out over the field, at the 300 dead sticks in the black water, at the ruined bottomland that everyone in the county had already decided was hopeless, at her grandmother's foolish, courageous, 60-year-old dream. Yes, she said finally. I believe her. Meredith slipped her small hand into Hazel's. Then I believe her too, she said. That night, after Ophelia and Meredith had gone home, Hazel sat on the porch steps in the last of the evening light. The rain had stopped for the first time in days. The sky was a strange bruised purple. Somewhere across the creek a whippoorwill was calling. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about a 16-year-old girl in 1894 walking down to a shack by the creek to meet a woman everyone else in town was afraid of. She thought about 58 years of dead sticks in a cedar chest. She thought about Silas Beaumont, 74 years old, selling his farm for a promise made in a hayfield when the century was still young. She thought about Ophelia Whitcomb eating bread for a year and never telling anyone. She thought about Meredith's small hand in hers, and how a 10-year-old girl had understood the whole thing, when a county full of grown men could not. She was still alone. Her father still hadn't come back. The bank was paid, but the winter was long, and she had $93 in the bank, and no crop, and no plan, and no idea whether the sticks in the ground would live or die. But she was not alone the way she had been. She was in a line. She was in a chain. She was in a long, slow river of women who had done impossible things because someone before them had done impossible things, and someone after them was going to need to do them too. She stood up. She went inside. She lit the kerosene lamp on the kitchen table. She opened her grandmother's journal to the last blank page. She took a pencil from the drawer, and she began to write. April 30th, 1952. The sticks are still in the ground. I don't know if they will live, but I planted them, and that is more than she got to do. I am going to write it all down, every day, so that if it works, someone will know. And if it fails, someone will know that too. Outside, the last of the rain dripped from the eaves. Inside, a young woman wrote by lamplight, and in a flooded field 100 yards away, in 6 inches of black water and old promises, 300 dead sticks began, in the quietest, slowest, most secret way possible, to remember what it felt like to be alive. But she did not know that yet. She would not know for another 21 days. The rain did not stop when April ended. May came in gray. May came in cold. May came in with the kind of steady, patient drumming on the roof that made a person forget what dry felt like. The creek rose again, then rose again, then rose one more time. By the second week of May, the field behind the house was a shallow lake, and the 300 sticks Hazel had planted were nearly gone from view. Only the tops showed, barely, like the last few inches of drowning men waving for help. Hazel walked the field anyway, every morning, every evening. She wore her grandmother's canvas jacket and her grandfather's old rubber boots, and she walked the perimeter of the water because she could not walk through it. Not anymore. The water was up to her hips in places. She could not check the sticks with her hands the way she had been doing. She could only look at them from the edge. And from the edge they looked exactly the same as the day she had planted them. Dead, or dying, or already gone. She started keeping the journal every night. Not just observations. Everything. What she ate. What she thought. What she remembered. What she was afraid of. She wrote by kerosene light at her grandmother's kitchen table until her hand cramped and her eyes burned. May 12th. The water is up again. I cannot see the middle rows. I am trying not to think about what they look like under the mud. May 14th. I dreamed about Grandma last night. She was in the kitchen making biscuits. I told her the sticks might be rotting. She said, "Hazel, the sticks are doing what sticks do. Your job is to keep your promises and stay out of God's way." Then I woke up. May 16th. Ophelia brought bread again. She sat with me for 2 hours. We didn't talk much. It was enough. May 18th. $91 in the bank now, because I bought lamp oil. She stopped writing that entry. She sat and stared at the wall for a long time. Then she added one more line. I don't know how long I can do this. The women came on a Thursday. Ophelia arrived first. On foot, with her basket, same as always, but this time she was not alone. Behind her, coming slowly up the lane, were 4 other women. Hazel saw them from the porch. She did not know what to do, because they were not just any 4 women. They were old women, church women, the kind of women who had opinions and knew whose opinions counted, and did not waste time on people whose opinions did not. They were the women who had stood at the back of Della's funeral. 12 people, half of them for the food, and now they were coming up her lane, in their good shoes, in the mud. Ophelia reached the porch first. "Hazel," she said, "I brought some folks. I hope you don't mind. Please, come in." They came in, all 5 of them. Ophelia and 4 others. They filled the little kitchen with the particular presence of women who had spent 70 years learning how to fill a kitchen. They took off their coats. They set down their baskets. They looked around at Della's things with the eyes of people who remembered when Della had been alive to touch them. Ophelia made the introductions. This is Cora Bellwether. She has known you since you were baptized. This is Nellie Fairchild. Her husband worked at the elevator with your daddy for a while. This is Prudence Doone. And this is Louisa Grange. Hazel remembered their faces. She did not really remember their names. She had been a child the last time she had seen any of them up close. She was suddenly very aware of her flannel shirt, with the hole in the elbow. She was suddenly very aware that she had not swept the kitchen floor in a week. Sit down, honey, Cora said. She was 72, tall, white hair, sharp blue eyes. Sit down before you fall down. Hazel sat down. Cora sat across from her. She folded her hands on the kitchen table. We are here because Ophelia told us what you're doing. I know how that sounds, Ophelia told us. And each of us has a story, and we decided you should hear them. Hazel looked around the table. 5 old women. 5 faces lined with weather and work and grief. 5 pairs of eyes fixed on her.
I'm listening.
Cora nodded once. 1935, she said. My husband ran off with a woman from Peoria. Left me with 2 children and no money. Della came to my door with a jar of soup. She said, Cora, you don't need pity, you need a chicken. She brought me a laying hen the next day. She showed me how to take care of it. She showed me how to sell the eggs. She helped me raise those 2 children for 4 years, until I could stand on my own. She never once asked me for anything back. Cora paused, cleared her throat. Nobody knew, she said, until today. Because today it matters that you know who she was. Hazel could not speak. Nellie Fairchild spoke next. She was 65, small and round and gray. Her voice was soft. 1944, she said. My Walter was killed in France. Bastogne. December. I had 3 little boys, and no way to feed them through the winter. Della started coming by on Tuesdays. She brought canned goods. She brought hand-me-down clothes for the boys. She sat with me some nights when I could not stop crying. She never said anything except this too will pass. 23 Tuesdays she came. Then in the spring the government pension started and I could manage. She stopped coming. She never mentioned it again. Prudence Doone was 70. She had rough red hands and a strong jaw. I couldn't read until I was 40, she said. 1938. My husband found out and slapped me because he was embarrassed. Della found out because I broke down at the church quilting circle. She came to my house every Wednesday afternoon for 8 months. She taught me my letters. She taught me my numbers. She taught me how to sign my name so I could stop having to make a mark like an animal. Nobody knew. My own husband did not know until the day I signed our tax return, and he asked when I had learned. I told him a friend taught me. I never told him who. She looked at Hazel, and her eyes were fierce. I have read every book in the Hollow Creek Library because of your grandmother. Every one. Twice. Louisa Grange was 63. Round-faced. Kind eyes. She spoke last. My daughter almost died of scarlet fever in 1941. 99 miles from the nearest hospital that would take a colored child. Della drove her to Chicago in her own car. 200 miles. In the snow. She sat with us in the waiting room for 2 days. When my daughter came out of the fever alive, Della paid the bill. All of it. I did not know she had paid it until 3 years later, when the hospital sent me a receipt by mistake. The kitchen was very quiet. Ophelia reached across the table and took Hazel's hand. There are more of us, she said. 11 that we know of, probably more that we don't. Your grandmother took care of women in this county for 40 years. Nobody knew because she did not want anyone to know. But she is gone now, and it is time to tell. Hazel put her hands over her face. I didn't know, she whispered. You weren't supposed to. I didn't know. Cora reached over and pulled Hazel's hands gently away from her face. Now you do, she said. And now it is our turn. We heard what you were doing with those sticks out there. We heard the whole county laughing about it. And we said among ourselves, Della Ainsworth's granddaughter is not going to stand alone in this. Not if we are still breathing. I don't need, yes you do, Ophelia said. And so did we. And she gave it to us. So sit down and let us give it to you. Hazel sat down. She cried. Cora went and put on the coffee. Nellie unpacked the basket and started slicing bread. Prudence rolled up her sleeves and started washing the week's worth of dishes Hazel had let pile up in the sink. Louisa found a broom and began sweeping the kitchen floor. Nobody made a big deal of it. They just started. And Hazel sat at the table and watched 5 old women fill her grandmother's kitchen with warmth and clatter and the smell of coffee, and she understood, for the first time, that she had never really been alone. She had just been alone lately. There was a difference. Ophelia brought her a mug of coffee. She sat down beside her, and she did not say anything. She just put her arm around Hazel's shoulders. And Hazel leaned into her the way she had once leaned into Della. They sat like that for a long time. The women came every week after that. Not all together. In shifts. Cora on Mondays. Nellie on Tuesdays. Ophelia and Meredith on Wednesdays. Prudence on Thursdays. Louisa on Fridays. They cooked. They cleaned. They repaired. They fed the chickens. They mended clothes. They brought jars of preserves and cuts of ham, and once, from Louisa, a whole ham hock that fed Hazel for a week. None of them mentioned the sticks. They knew Hazel would talk about it when she was ready to talk about it. Until then, it was not their business. Their business was making sure Hazel Ainsworth ate a hot meal, and slept in clean sheets, and knew, every day of the week, that somebody was going to knock on her door. Hazel started smiling again. She did not notice it happening. But Ophelia noticed. The child is coming back to herself, Ophelia told Cora one evening. She has good bones, Cora said. Like Della. And she is stubborn, Ophelia said. Also like Della. Cora smiled. Yes, she said. That too. Cyrus Thorne heard about the women within a week. Word traveled fast in Hollow Creek. Always did, especially when the word was worth chewing on. The old church widows are helping the Ainsworth girl. Which ones? Ophelia Whitcomb, Cora Belwith, Nellie Fairchild, Prudence Doone, Louisa Grange. All of them? All of them. Well, nothing to do about it. Old women bringing pies. Doesn't change what's in that field. But something in Cyrus's face changed when he heard it, because Cyrus Thorne understood women better than most men in Hollow Creek. He had grown up with a mother who had run their family farm for 12 years, after his father drank himself into an early grave. He knew what a group of women could do when they decided to do it. He had watched his mother turn 80 acres of ruined ground into a working dairy operation by the sheer force of her own will, and the quiet, loyal help of 3 sister-in-laws and a widowed cousin. Cyrus Thorne knew, in a way most men did not, that a group of old women in a kitchen was not a joke. It was a fortress. He did not go out to Hazel's place after that. He went, instead, to the bank. Roland Hemmings adjusted his tie when Cyrus Thorne walked into his office. The mortgage on the Ainsworth property, Cyrus said. Without sitting down. Paid in full. As of April 19th. Yes, I heard. That old fool Beaumont. He is entitled to spend his money as he sees fit. Cyrus sat down without being asked. He put his hat on Roland's desk. Very deliberately, on top of a stack of papers Roland had been working on. Roland, he said, how much of my note do you hold? 12,300, Mr. Thorne. As of the 1st. And how much of my son Jesse's operation are you carrying? For 1,000 and change. And how much would you like me to move to First National in Champaign next month? Roland went very still. Mr. Thorne, what are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to remember who your friends are. That property is prime river access. I've wanted it for a decade. The girl is 19 years old, and she is planting sticks. Sticks. In the mud. If she cannot manage that property responsibly, then someone needs to intervene before she runs it into the ground. She has no debt to the bank. There is no legal basis for intervention. Then find one. Mr. Thorne, the taxes are due in July. Are they not? Yes. Does she have the money for the taxes?
Roland hésita.
I don't know. Then find out. Cyrus stood up. He picked up his hat. He put it on. He walked to the door. He turned around.
Roland.
I have banked with you for 18 years. I would like to bank with you for 18 more. Whether that happens is up to you. He left. Roland Hemmings sat at his desk for a long time. Then he pulled out the Ainsworth file, and he began, slowly, unhappily, to make a list. Warren Ashcroft came back on May 21st. He came without an appointment, without his clipboard, without his good shirt. He came in an old jacket and a pair of muddy boots, and he stood at the edge of the field for 20 minutes, before he came up to the house. Hazel was at the kitchen table. She saw him from the window. She stood up. She smoothed her hair. She went out to the porch. Mr. Ashcroft. He turned. He looked at her a long moment. He looked older than he had in April, tired around the eyes. Miss Ainsworth, may I come up? Yes. He walked up the porch steps. He did not sit down. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, and he looked at his boots. I owe you an apology, he said. Hazel did not speak. I came out here in April, and I told you your grandmother's project was going to fail. I was very certain. I was rude. I have come to realize this week, very possibly wrong. He reached into his jacket. He took out a book. An old book. Leather-bound. Cracked spine. I found this in the university library. In the closed stacks. It was published in 1889. It is a monograph on the use of salix cultivars for soil remediation in the alluvial floodplains of the Missouri Basin. Written by a woman named Adelaide Vance, who was, at the time, the only female botanist working at the University of Chicago. He held the book out. I would like you to have it. It is technically a library book. I do not intend to return it. Hazel took the book. It was heavy. It smelled like 100 years of dust. Mr. Ashcroft. Warren. Please, Warren. Why are you doing this? He looked out over the field. At the water. At the sticks that were now, at last, showing more of themselves, as the water receded a little. My mother, he said. My mother was an herbalist. In Kansas, where I grew up, she kept a garden. She helped women in our town who could not afford the doctor. She delivered babies. She set broken bones. She knew from her mother which roots would break a fever and which leaves would stop a cough. She was, in her way, exactly the sort of woman your grandmother was. He stopped. He rubbed the back of his neck. The town called her a witch. Behind her back. Sometimes to her face. I was ashamed of her. I was 14 years old, and I was ashamed of my own mother. So I studied hard, and I went to college, and I got a degree in scientific agriculture, and I came out here to tell women like her that their knowledge was wrong. His voice caught. She died alone in 1943. I had not been home in 7 years. I did not go to her funeral. I told myself I was too busy. I was not too busy. I was afraid. Hazel did not say anything. I looked at your sticks in April, he said, and I saw my mother. And I did what I had been trained to do. I dismissed them. I dismissed you. I want you to know I am sorry. Hazel looked at him a long moment. You could not have known. I could have listened. She nodded. She held the book against her chest. Warren, she said, my grandmother would forgive you, if she were here. He turned his face away. I hope so, he said quietly. He came down the steps. He walked to his car. He did not look back. Hazel stood on the porch with the book in her hands. She thought about how many people were walking around Hollow Creek, carrying quiet secret griefs about the women they had failed to love properly. She thought it might be most of them. Meredith woke her up before dawn on May 22nd. The child had spent the night at Ophelia's insistence. Hazel had made up the little bed in the sewing room. Meredith had fallen asleep with her thumb in her mouth. Hazel had watched her sleep for a long time. Meredith looked, in the lamplight, like every child Hazel had never had. Now Meredith was standing beside Hazel's bed in her nightgown, tugging at Hazel's hand. Miss Hazel, wake up. What is it? What's wrong? Nothing. Come with me, sweetheart. It is dark outside. The sun is coming up. Please,
Come?
Hazel got up. She pulled a jacket over her nightgown. She followed the child out onto the porch. The world was silver. The mist was up, heavy on the field, waist-high. The sky over the eastern trees was just starting to go pink. The air smelled like wet earth and coming light. Meredith pointed. The sticks, she whispered. What about them? I dreamed they were talking. Come see. They walked down the slope together. The wet grass soaked Hazel's hem. Meredith did not let go of her hand. Ophelia was already there. She was standing at the edge of the field, in her nightgown, and a shawl, and her rubber boots. Her white hair was loose down her back. She looked, in the mist, like a ghost, from an older century. I couldn't sleep, she said when they reached her, so I came down. And then this child came flying past my house yelling for you. Hazel looked at her. Ophelia. Look, the old woman said. Hazel looked. At first she saw only the sticks. Gray. Straight.
Bare.
Same as every morning for 6 weeks. Then she saw it. A cutting at the near edge. 3rd row. 2nd from the end. Something on it. Something small. Something that was not there yesterday. Hazel stepped into the mud. She did not care about her nightgown. She waded to the cutting. She knelt down. She put her face close to the bark. A bud, the size of a match head, pale green, almost translucent, pressed against the gray bark like a tiny fist waiting to open. Hazel put her fingertip against it. It was warm. She sat back on her heels in the mud. She stared at it. She could not process what she was seeing. Her mind kept sliding off it, because the sticks were dead. She had known this for 6 weeks. She had made her peace with it. She had built a whole plan around the possibility that this had been a beautiful, hopeless gesture toward her grandmother, and nothing more. And now, a bud. She stood up. She waded to the next cutting. She looked. Another bud. She waded to the next, and the next, and the next. She started counting. She could not count fast enough. Her hands were shaking. She waded through the mud, with her nightgown wet to the knees, and her hair in her face, and she counted 20, then 40, then 60, then 80. At cutting number 89 in the middle of the field, she stopped. She had felt something, under the water, around the base of the cutting. She reached down into the black water with both hands, and she scooped away the mud. And she saw them, roots, fine white roots, thin as spider silk, reaching down into the mud in every direction. A whole net of them, alive, growing. Hazel sat down in the water, right there in the middle of the field, in her nightgown, in 6 inches of black water. She put her face in her hands, and she wept. Meredith came splashing out through the mud to reach her. The child did not care about her own wet nightgown either. She threw her arms around Hazel's neck. She was crying too without knowing why. Just because Hazel was crying. Ophelia stood at the edge of the field. She was crying without making a sound. 58 years, she said, so quiet nobody could hear her. 58 years, Della. The sun came up over the trees. The mist began to lift, and in 6 inches of black water, 300 dead sticks became, in the impossible way of living things, 300 small green whispers of yes. By the end of the week, 127 cuttings had put out buds. By the middle of June they were saplings, 2 feet tall, slender, silver-green leaves the size of a woman's fingernail, roots so thick and so deep that the mud around them was beginning to change color, beginning to break up, beginning to breathe. Hazel walked among them every morning. She still could not quite believe it. She kept the journal every night. Longer entries now. Full pages. Sketches. Measurements. She realized, writing a book. A real book. The book her grandmother had not lived to write. The women kept coming. They saw the saplings. They understood, before anyone else in the county understood, what was happening. Cora stood at the edge of the field one afternoon, and she wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron. Della is standing behind me right now, she said. I can feel her. Hazel did not doubt it. Cyrus Thorne saw the trees on June 19th. He drove out to Hollow Creek without warning. He parked his truck at the fence line. He got out. He walked to the field. He stood there for a long time. The saplings were now 3 feet tall in places. Nearly 4. Their leaves shimmered in the summer sun. The mud around them was drier than the mud outside their reach. The whole field had a look he had never seen before. It had a look of being alive. He did not say hello to Hazel when she came down to meet him. He said, "How did you do this?" "I did not do it. My grandmother did it. 58 years ago in her head. I just followed the instructions." He stared at the trees. "The bank is coming out next week," he said finally. "I know. They will want to reassess the tax value. I know that too." He turned to her, and his face was not cruel. It was not gloating. It was something worse. It was tired. It was the tiredness of a man who has spent 40 years being the meanest thing in the room and has just realized that a 19-year-old girl might have quietly outflanked him. "I could still buy you out," he said. "Right now. Twice the mortgage. Cash." "No, thank you. You do not understand what you have." "I understand it fine." He looked at her a long moment. "You are like her," he said. "I hope so." He walked back to his truck. He did not look at the trees again. But before he drove away, he sat in the cab of the truck for a long time. And he did something that no one in Hollow Creek would ever have believed possible. He put his forehead down against the steering wheel. And he wept. He wept for reasons he did not entirely understand himself. He wept for the mother, who had raised him on 80 ruined acres by pure will. He wept for the fact that a girl he had tried to swindle was going to save the same kind of land his mother had saved. He wept because he was 60 years old, and he had spent his entire life buying up the farms of dying men and dying women, and he had never once, in all that time, planted anything that would outlive him. He drove home. He did not tell his wife why he was quiet at supper. Edmund Ainsworth came back on June 25th. Hazel had not seen her father in 6 weeks. She was on the porch shelling peas when his truck came up the lane. She stood up so fast she knocked the bowl over. The peas went everywhere. He got out of the truck. He walked to the porch. He stood at the bottom of the steps. He did not come up. "Hazel," he said. "Daddy, I heard about the trees." She did not know what to say. He looked out at the field. From the porch you could see them. The whole grove. Silver green in the summer sun. 300 small trees, where a month ago there had been 300 sticks in black water. He looked for a long time. Then he took off his hat. He held it in both hands. He turned it in a slow circle. "I was wrong," he said. "Daddy, I was wrong about a lot of things. I was wrong about your grandmother. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about the field." He looked up at her, and his eyes were the eyes of a man who had been carrying a stone for 22 years and did not know how to put it down. "I need to tell you something," he said. She waited. "Come inside," she said finally. "I'll make coffee." They sat at the kitchen table, where they had not sat together in 6 years. Where the last time they had sat together they had fought about her leaving for college, and Della had cried, and Hazel had left the house in tears, and everyone had been miserable, and Edmund had gone home to town, and had not come back for 11 months. Hazel made coffee. She set a mug in front of him. He did not drink it. He looked at his hands on the table. "Alma," he said. Hazel did not know the name. "Alma Coates. That was her name. She died in 1930. I was 20 years old. I loved her." Hazel sat very still. "She had the consumption," Edmund said. "Tuberculosis. She had been sick for a year, but nobody in town knew. Her family kept it quiet. I wanted to marry her. I had a ring. I had asked her father. He had said yes." His voice went quiet. "Your grandmother found out about the sickness. I do not know how. She came to me. She sat me down in this kitchen. She told me Alma was going to die. She told me the doctors had said maybe 6 months. She told me I should not marry her. She told me it would break me." He stopped. Hazel waited. "I did not believe her," he said. "I thought she was making it up. I thought she was jealous. I thought she wanted to keep me for herself. I thought, God forgive me, I thought she was using her witchcraft to curse Alma, because that was what people in town said your grandmother did. And I was young and I was scared, and I believed them over her. His hands were shaking now. I told her I hated her, he said. I told her I would never speak to her again. I left this house. I moved into town. I went to see Alma. I told her about the wedding date. I made her promise she was fine. He stopped for a long moment. She died 6 weeks later. Hazel put her hand over her mouth. I blamed your grandmother, Edmund said, for the rest of her life. 22 years. I blamed her. I told myself she had known, and had made it happen. I told myself if she had not spoken up, Alma would have lived. I told myself 100 things. None of them were true. I knew none of them were true, but I could not let them go, Hazel. Because if I let them go, I had to admit that I had spent my life hating my mother for telling me the truth. He was crying now, silently, tears running down his cheeks. He did not wipe them. Hazel did not know what to say. She got up from the table. She went to the drawer under the china cabinet. She took out Della's journal. She turned to a page near the middle. She had marked it with a piece of ribbon. She sat back down. She slid the journal across the table. Read this, she said. Edmund pulled the journal toward him. He put on his reading glasses. His hands were shaking, so hard he had trouble holding the book steady. November 1930. My son buried the Coates girl today. He did not tell me. I found out from Mrs. Peebles. I went to the cemetery after dark. I sat by her grave for an hour. I told her I was sorry. I told her I had spent every night of the last 4 months sitting with her in her mother's parlor. I told her I had held her hand when the fever was high. I told her I had wiped her face when she vomited blood. I told her I had prayed with her mother when the priest could not come in time. I told her I did all of that because Edmund loved her, and Edmund could not bear to watch her die. And now Edmund thinks I killed her. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to tell him without breaking him a second time. So I am not going to tell him. I will carry it. That is a mother's job. To carry the things her children cannot. Edmund made a sound. It was not a word. It was not a sob. It was something older than either. He put the journal down very carefully on the table. He put his face in his hands. He wept the way a man weeps when he has been holding something for 22 years and has just been given permission to put it down. Hazel came around the table. She sat down next to him. She put her arm around his shoulders. He was shaking. He was 42 years old and he was crying like a child, and Hazel was 19 years old, and she was holding her father because there was no one else to do it. Mama, he was saying. Mama, Mama. I'm so sorry. Hazel held him. She did not tell him it was okay, because it was not okay. 22 years was 22 years. But she held him, and she rocked him a little, the way Della had rocked her, when she was 8, and had just been told her parents were not coming home. The kitchen got dark around them. Neither of them got up to light the lamp. Eventually he stopped shaking. He sat up. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. He looked at her. I don't know how to be your father, he said. I don't know how to let you. He nodded. We can figure it out, he said. If you'll let me try. You can come Sunday. Sunday. Ophelia will bring a pie. Meredith will make you play checkers. Cora will tell you what she thinks of you. It's not going to be easy. Edmund almost smiled. I deserve worse than checkers, he said. You'll get what you get. He stood up. He picked up his hat. He walked to the door. He stopped. Hazel. Yes. Your grandmother. Was she, in the end, was she at peace? Hazel thought about it a long moment. She was tired, she said. But yes, I think so. She told me on the last morning that she was ready. She told me she was going to see Granddaddy. She said, tell my Edmund I never stopped loving him. Not one day. Edmund's face crumpled. He nodded once. He could not speak. He walked out to his truck. He got in. He sat there for a long time before he started the engine. Hazel stood on the porch and watched him. She was not crying anymore. She felt hollow and clean the way a person feels after weeping until there is nothing left inside. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about the years and years of silence, and the price of it, and the way 300 sticks in a cedar chest had waited 58 years to give their gift, because one girl in 1894 had been brave enough to plant them, and one girl in 1952 had been desperate enough to try. She thought about how much a person can carry. She thought about how much a mother can carry. The truck started. Her father pulled away. Hazel watched him go, until his tail lights were out of sight. Then she went back inside. She lit the kerosene lamp. She sat down at the kitchen table. She opened her grandmother's journal. She turned to the last blank page. She picked up her pencil. June 25, 1952. My father came home today. He read the entry about Alma. He wept for 2 hours. I do not know if we will be all right, but he is coming Sunday. That is a start. Grandma, if you can hear me, he knows. He knows everything. It is not too late. Outside, the summer wind moved through the willows. They were 4 feet tall now. Their leaves rustled in the dark like the sound of 1,000 small hands clapping. And somewhere, in the deep quiet part of the night, the drought that was going to change Hollow Creek forever began, with no warning, to draw its first hot breath. The rain stopped on July 3rd, just like that. No warning. The sky that had been gray for 4 months turned hard cornflower blue overnight. The wind shifted, came out of the southwest hot and dry, and the whole county stood in its doorways the next morning and looked at a sun that suddenly had teeth. By July 10th, the corn was starting to curl. By July 20th, the soybeans were yellowing at the edges. By the end of the month, the pastures were brown, the ponds were shrinking, and old men were sitting on their porches at night saying it feels like 1936 all over again. 1936. That was the year the Sangamon River had gone, so low a boy could walk across it in his shoes. The year cattle had died in the fields with their tongues black. The year 6 families in Hollow Creek County had loaded their trucks and left for California and never come back. Nobody wanted to say the word, drought. If you said it, it would come. But it had already come. Hazel felt it on the wind. She stood on the porch on August 2nd, and she watched the horizon shimmer with heat, and she understood, before Warren Ashcroft came to tell her, before Ophelia came running with the news, before the county extension office issued its first advisory, that Hollow Creek was in trouble. She walked down to the field. The willows were 7 feet tall now. Their leaves were a deeper green than the willows along the creek had ever been. Their trunks were thick as her wrist. Their branches reached out over each other in the beginning of what would eventually be a canopy. The ground under them was soft and dark and cool. She knelt down. She put her hand on the earth. The earth was damp. She stood up. She walked 10 feet outside the reach of the willows. She knelt down again. She put her hand on that earth. That earth was dust. She stared at her hand, because she understood in that moment what she was looking at. The willows were making their own rain. Not really, not literally, but almost. Their leaves shaded the ground. Their roots pulled water from deep underground and pushed it back up through the soil. Their fallen leaves and small twigs mulched the earth, so it did not lose what moisture it had. In the small kingdom of the willow grove, it was still spring. Outside the kingdom, it was already August in hell. Hazel looked out over the field. She looked at the 300 trees her grandmother had planted in her head 58 years ago. She said, out loud to nobody, or maybe to Della, I understand now. Meredith found her there an hour later. The child came running down the slope, barefoot, her braids flying. She had grown 2 inches over the summer. She was almost 11 now. She was tan and skinny, and she had opinions about everything. She stopped at the edge of the trees. Miss Hazel. Yes, honey. Grandma says you have to come to the house right now. Because Mr. Ashcroft is here, and he has papers, and he says it is important. Hazel wiped her hands on her overalls. She followed Meredith up the slope. Warren was on the porch. He was not wearing his suit. He was wearing an old work shirt and denim trousers. His clipboard was on the porch swing beside him. He was holding a mason jar of iced tea Ophelia had put in his hand. He stood up when Hazel came around the corner. "Miss Ainsworth, Mr. Ashcroft, what is it?" He held out an envelope. "Came in from the state office this morning," he said. "I wanted to bring it to you myself." Hazel took it. She opened it. She read. She read it twice. She sat down slowly on the porch step. "What does it say?" Ophelia said. She was standing in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Hazel held the letter up. "It's from the Illinois Department of Agriculture," she said. "They want to visit the property. They have been informed of, quote, an unusual and potentially significant experiment in soil remediation, unquote. They want to bring a team of researchers. In 2 weeks." Ophelia sat down beside her. Warren stood there twisting his hat. "I sent them a letter," he said, "in June. I did not tell you because I did not want to get your hopes up, if nothing came of it. I sent them my measurements, my photographs, my notes. I told them what your grandmother had done, what you had done. I told them everything." Hazel stared at him. "Why?" she said. "Because it works." He looked down at his boots. "Because for 15 years I have been telling the farmers of this county to do things that do not work. Chemical fertilizers, deep drainage tiles, monoculture rotations, all the things they taught me at the university. And it has ruined the soil. It has ruined the water. It has ruined the men who followed my advice. And now here comes a 19-year-old girl and her dead grandmother, and they show me in 6 months more about how to heal a piece of land than I have learned in 15 years of training." He looked up. "Somebody needs to know about this, Miss Ainsworth. Not just Hollow Creek. Not just Illinois. Everybody. I am not going to sit on it. I am not going to let it end with you." Hazel could not speak. Ophelia reached over and took her hand. Meredith climbed up on the porch and sat down on Hazel's other side. She leaned her head against Hazel's shoulder. "You are going to be in the newspaper," the child said, solemnly. Hazel laughed, a little wildly. "Maybe, sweetheart. Grandma says newspapers are trouble. Your grandma is not wrong." Cyrus Thorne came on August 9th. He came alone. He drove his truck up the lane. He parked at a respectful distance. He got out. He walked. He did not stride. He did not swagger. He walked like a man whose knees hurt, which they did, because he had not slept in 3 nights. He had lost 600 acres of corn. Not all of it. Not yet. But it was going. Every day another 20 acres crossed the line, from struggling to dying. Every day another 20 acres of Cyrus Thorne's future disappeared, into the cracks in the ground. He had irrigation on his best 100 acres, and he could keep those alive for another 2 weeks maybe. After that, he did not know. He walked up the porch steps. He took off his hat. He knocked on the door. Hazel opened it. "Miss Ainsworth. Mr. Thorne. May I come in?" "Yes." She led him to the kitchen. She sat him at the table. She did not offer him coffee. She was not that generous. Not yet. He set his hat on the table. He put his hands flat on either side of it. He looked at his hands. He did not look up. "I owe you an apology," he said. Hazel did not speak. "I tried to buy your land for less than it was worth. I tried to bully you off it. I went to the bank and I asked Roland Hemmings to squeeze you on the tax assessment. He did not do it, to his credit. He came to me last week, and he told me he would not do it. He said he was too old to be that kind of man anymore. I told him he was fired as my banker. He told me he was old enough not to care." Cyrus paused. "Ashcroft was right," Cyrus said. "About what I was. About what I have been." For a long time, Hazel sat across from him. She did not help him. Not one word. "I have a grandson," Cyrus said. "His name is Toby. He is 7. He is going to inherit 1,200 acres of land that I have been running into the ground for 40 years. Chemical fertilizers, cash crops, every trick the university had. And it is dust. It is all dust. He is going to inherit dust." He looked up finally. His eyes were red. "I do not deserve your help. I have not earned it. I know that. But I am asking. Not for me. For him. Hazel looked at him a long moment. Then she stood up. She went to the back porch. She opened the door. She stepped outside. She was gone for maybe 2 minutes. She came back with a bundle. 50 cuttings. Freshly cut. Tied with baling twine. She set them on the table in front of Cyrus. She said, "These are not from me. These are from my grandmother. She would have given them to you in 1948, if you had ever bothered to knock on her door and ask." Cyrus made a small sound in his throat. "Soak them 3 days in rainwater," Hazel said. "Plant them 12 inches deep in the wettest ground you have. Full sun. Wait. When they root, cut them again. Give them away. Do not sell them. Do not hoard them. Give them away. That is the only condition." Cyrus picked up the bundle. He held it in both hands. He looked at Hazel. "Miss Ainsworth. Just Hazel. Hazel. Because my grandmother would have. And because if I hoard what she left me, it makes me exactly the kind of person she was trying not to be. She kept her mouth shut for 58 years, Mr. Thorne. 58 years. I am not doing that. Not anymore. It goes forward from this table today. To your grandson. To anybody who asks. Anybody. That is the only way we heal this county. Together. Or not at all." Cyrus Thorne, 60 years old, 1,200 acres, 3 broken marriages behind him, put his face in his hands. Right there at Della Ainsworth's kitchen table. And he wept quietly for a long time. He was still weeping when Ophelia came in, with a plate of cornbread, and set it down beside him without saying a word. Word got out. It always did in Hollow Creek. By the 2nd week of August, Hazel had given away 400 cuttings. By the 3rd week, she had given away 900. She stopped counting after that. They came in trucks. They came in wagons. They came on foot. Farmers she had known all her life. Farmers she had never seen before, from 3 counties over. Their wives came with them. Their children came with them. They came with hats in their hands, and worry in their eyes, and they stood at Hazel's fence, and they waited. She did not turn anyone away. She taught them at the kitchen table. In groups of 5, 6, 10. She showed them how to select cuttings, how to soak them, how to plant them. She showed them how to read the ground, how to look for the low places, how to know where the water wanted to go. She did not do it alone. Ophelia sat with her. Cora came on the days she was supposed to. Nellie brought coffee for the visitors. Prudence kept a list of everyone who came and how many cuttings they took, and where they were going to plant them. Louisa fed everyone who stayed past noon. The 5 old women became, without ever discussing it, a kind of council. Hazel would look up from a demonstration and find Cora across the room quietly nodding approval, or Ophelia refilling someone's coffee cup, or Prudence writing a name in her book, or Louisa handing a piece of cornbread to a child, and she would feel at those moments that her grandmother was in the room, not as a ghost, as an inheritance, living, continuing, passing through 5 other pairs of hands. Silas came back on August 23rd. He had been in Danville all summer, in his little rented room. Hazel had gone to see him twice, once in June, once in July. He had looked older each time. In July she had noticed his left hand shook when he lifted his coffee cup. He had noticed her noticing. He had said, "Don't worry about it, child. I am 74. Things shake." Now he came back to Hollow Creek. Not by choice. Ophelia telephoned Hazel from the general store in town. "Hazel, Silas has had a stroke. It is not bad, but he cannot live alone anymore. The doctor at the hospital in Champaign wants to send him to a home." "He is not going to a home. I did not think he was. I am coming to get him. Meet me at the hospital. I will drive." Hazel drove her grandmother's old Ford. Ophelia sat beside her. They did not talk much. When they got to the hospital, Silas was in a room at the end of the ward. His left side was weak. His speech was a little slurred, but his mind was clear, and his eyes were still October Creek water. He tried to argue. "Hazel, I do not want to be a burden. Silas, the house is too small. And your work. Silas, I do not want to be one more thing you have to take care of. She sat down on the edge of the bed. She took his good hand. You sold your farm for me, she said. You are coming home. That is not an argument. That is a fact. He closed his eyes.
Della, he whispered.
What? He opened his eyes again. He smiled a very small smile. Nothing, child. You just sounded like her for a second. She brought him home in the back seat of the Ford. Ophelia sat with him and held his hand the whole way. They set him up in the sitting room. Della's old bed. Della's old quilt. Della's window that looked out over the field. He cried when he saw the willows. He had not seen them since April. Look at them, he whispered. Look at them. They gave him the best chair. They put him next to the window. He watched the trees grow for the rest of the summer. Edmund came every Sunday. He came at 9. He stayed until dusk. He was awkward. He was quiet. He did not know how to be in his mother's kitchen. After 22 years, he kept picking up things and putting them down. A wooden spoon, a tea towel, a jar of jam. Small objects that had lived their whole lives on Della's counters and had watched him grow up. The women let him be awkward. They did not perform for him. Ophelia treated him like a nephew who had finally come to his senses. Cora treated him like a schoolboy who had gotten a low mark and would need to do better. Nellie treated him like her own dead husband. She would put a plate of food in front of him and say, "Eat, Edmund," and he would eat. Meredith treated him like a project. The child had decided that Edmund needed to learn checkers, and that she was going to teach him. She was 10 years old, and she was fierce about it. She would drag the board out after Sunday dinner, and she would set it up, and she would say, "Sit down, Mr. Edmund," and Edmund would sit down. She beat him every time. He never won a game. He did not seem to mind. "Meredith, am I ever going to beat you?" "No, Mr. Edmund." "Why not?" "Because you are too sad. Sad people cannot play checkers well." Grandma says. Hazel would hear this from the kitchen and put her hand over her mouth. Edmund would laugh. Quiet, real laugh. The kind he had not laughed in 22 years. "She's not wrong," he would say. "I know," Meredith would say. "Grandma is never wrong." The state researchers came on August 25th. 3 of them, 2 men, 1 woman, from the University of Illinois. They wore white shirts and clean shoes, and they carried leather cases full of testing equipment. They stayed for 3 days. They measured everything. They measured the pH of the soil under the willows. They measured the pH of the soil 10 feet away from the willows. They measured the moisture content. They measured the organic matter. They measured the root spread. They measured the canopy. They measured the leaf drop. They measured the microbial activity in the mud. They did not measure Hazel. They should have. The woman researcher noticed. She was young, maybe 30. Her name was Dr. Frances Merritt. She was one of 2 women in the entire graduate program at the university. She had noticed on the first day that Hazel did not sit at the table when the men were talking. She had noticed that Hazel stood at the counter. She had noticed that Hazel would answer questions when asked and otherwise stay quiet. On the second evening, Dr. Merritt asked Hazel to walk with her. They walked down to the field. The sun was low. The willows threw long shadows across the mud. The air smelled like green things. "Miss Ainsworth," Dr. Merritt said. Hazel, may I ask you something?" "Yes." "Where did your grandmother learn this?" Hazel walked in silence for a moment. "She learned it from a woman named Winona Redfeather," she said. "In 1894, Winona lived in a shack by the creek. She was very old. She had learned it from her mother. Her mother had learned it from her mother. I do not know how far back it goes. My grandmother wrote it all down in her journal. I have the journal." Dr. Merritt stopped walking. "May I see it?" "Yes. But I want to tell you something first." "Anything. If you publish this. If you write about it. My grandmother's name goes on it. And Winona Redfeather's name goes on it. Not just mine. My name is small. Their names have been erased for a very long time. If you take this knowledge and put your name on it, you will be doing what men have been doing to women like Winona for 400 years. Dr. Merritt looked at her a long moment. I understand, she said quietly. Hazel nodded. Then come see the journal. They walked back to the house. Dr. Merritt sat at the kitchen table for the next 2 hours reading. She stopped several times to wipe her eyes. She did not try to hide it. When she was done, she closed the journal very gently. She looked at Hazel. I promise you, she said. Their names go first. Warren wrote the pamphlet in September. He wrote it at Hazel's kitchen table, over 4 Saturdays. Hazel read every draft. Ophelia read every draft. Prudence, who had learned to read at 40, from Della, read every draft twice. The final title, printed at the top of the first page in careful serif type, was Willow Cuttings for the Remediation of Flooded and Depleted Bottomland, a Practical Guide. Under the title, in smaller letters, based on the work and teachings of Winona Redfeather, Della Ainsworth and Hazel Ainsworth, compiled with the permission and guidance of the Ainsworth family. Illinois Cooperative Extension Service, 1952. Warren brought the printer's proof to the kitchen table on the last Saturday in September. Hazel read it. She traced Winona's name with her fingertip. She traced Della's name with her fingertip. Then she looked at Warren. Print it, she said. 10,000 copies. First run. The Extension Service mailed them to every county agent in Illinois, then to Iowa, then to Missouri, then to Indiana. By spring of 1953, there were willows going into the ground in 11 states. By spring of 1955, there were willows in the ground in every state east of the Mississippi. Edmund came on September 15th. He came at dawn. He did not tell Hazel he was coming. He parked his truck at the fence line. He did not come to the house. He walked, in his good shoes, up the slope to the hill behind the house, to his mother's grave. Hazel saw him from the kitchen window. She had gotten up early to write in the journal. She was at the sink, filling the coffee pot. She looked up and saw a man walking up the hill in the gray morning light. She did not recognize him for a moment. He looked so small, so bent. Then she saw the truck. She set the coffee pot down. She went out to the porch. She stood there. She watched. Edmund reached the grave. He stood at the foot of it for a long time. He did not kneel. Not right away. He just stood. Then his knees folded. He went down on the grass. He put both hands on the headstone. And even from 100 yards away, Hazel could see that her father was sobbing. She did not go to him. She stayed on the porch. She sat down on the top step. She wrapped her arms around her knees. She watched her father weep at his mother's grave in the dawnlight on the 15th of September. He was there for over an hour. The sun came up over the trees. The willows started to shine. The mist began to lift. A jay called from somewhere in the woods. Edmund finally stood up. He wiped his face. He stayed a moment longer, talking. Hazel could not hear the words, but she could see his mouth moving. She could see him nodding sometimes, as if he was hearing something back. Then he turned, and he walked down the hill. He saw her on the porch. He came across the yard. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He looked up at her. I don't know where to start, he said. His voice was hoarse. Hazel stood up. She came down the steps. She stopped in front of him. You started already, she said. She put her hand on his cheek. He closed his eyes. Come inside, she said. I'll make you coffee. Ophelia will be here in an hour. She'll bring pie. It's Wednesday. I don't deserve pie. You'll get it anyway. He almost laughed. Then he did laugh. Wet and small and real. He nodded. He came inside. The county came on September 30th. It was a Tuesday. Hazel woke before dawn. She could not have said why. Some part of her knew. She lit the kerosene lamp. She dressed in her grandmother's canvas jacket. She braided her hair. She looked in the mirror, over the sink, and she thought, for one strange second, that she saw Della looking back at her. She went out to the porch. The sun was just coming up. The willows were shining. She looked down the lane. They were coming. A line of trucks. A line of wagons. People on foot. stretching back to the main road, stretching around the bend. Farmers she knew, farmers she did not, their wives, their children, old men, young men, widows, mothers, and at the front of the line, at the very front, walking together in a group, were the women, Ophelia, Cora, Nellie, Prudence, Louisa, and behind them 30 more, women Hazel had met over the summer, women who had come for cuttings, women who had brought bread, women who had never, before in their lives, walked down a country lane at dawn in a group. Ophelia held Meredith's hand. Meredith was wearing her Sunday dress. They stopped at the fence. The whole procession stopped behind them. They waited. Hazel came down the porch steps. She walked across the yard. Her boots were wet with dew. The willows were shining behind her. She could feel her grandmother walking beside her. Not in the ghost way, in the every way, in the way a life continues in the person who comes after. She stopped at the fence. Ophelia opened the gate. Hazel walked through. She looked at the line of people. She looked at the faces of the men who had laughed at her in April. Cyrus Thorne was there, standing at the back, his hat in his hands. Roland Hemmings was there, 2 rows behind Cyrus. Warren Ashcroft was there, up front, standing beside Ophelia. Nobody was laughing. Hazel looked at Ophelia. Ophelia nodded. "Go on, honey." Hazel took a breath. She looked at the crowd. "I do not have a speech," she said. She did not have to raise her voice. The morning was that quiet. "I only have a rule. You can have all the cuttings you want. All of them. Free. No money.
No faber soud.
But there is one condition." She paused. "When your trees grow, and they will grow, you have to give cuttings to 3 other people. And you have to teach them, not just show them. Teach them, and you have to make them do the same. Especially to the girls. Especially to the girls. Do you hear me? Do not let another woman have to learn this from the beginning like I did." She looked at the faces. "My grandmother kept this quiet for 58 years, she said, because she was afraid of what people would say. She died with cuttings in her attic that could have healed 100 farms. I am not going to let that happen again. This does not belong to me. It did not belong to her. It belongs to a woman named Winona Redfeather, who lived by the creek, before any of us were born. It belongs to Winona's mother, and to her mother's mother. It belongs to all the women who came before, and all the women coming after." She looked at Meredith. The child was looking up at her with wide, serious eyes. "It belongs to her," Hazel said, "as much as it belongs to any of us." She turned back to the crowd. "Now come and take what you need." They came. They came all day. Ophelia and the other women organized the line. Prudence kept the book. Louisa fed everyone lunch. Meredith carried bundles of cuttings, from the back porch to the front table, back and forth, for 6 hours, and she did not complain once. Hazel gave away every cutting she had. When the last person left at dusk, she sat down on the porch step. She was too tired to stand. Ophelia sat down beside her. They watched the last truck pull out of the lane. Then Ophelia took Hazel's hand. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said. Hazel did not answer. She was crying too hard to answer, but she squeezed Ophelia's hand. And Ophelia understood. 5 years later, Hollow Creek County, Illinois. Spring 1957. The bus stopped in front of the little schoolhouse at 7:45 sharp. Meredith Whitcomb got off. She was 15 years old now, tall for her age. Her hair was in one long braid down her back. She wore a blue dress and sensible shoes, and she carried a stack of books under her arm. She walked up the path to the schoolhouse. She waved to Miss Hazel through the window. Miss Hazel waved back. Inside, Hazel Ainsworth, 24 years old, was writing on the blackboard. On the board she was drawing a diagram, a cross-section of soil, a tree with roots reaching down, small arrows showing the movement of water. The 7 younger children at their desks were watching her with wide eyes. Meredith came in. She hung her coat on the hook. She took her seat at the back. She opened her notebook. Good morning, Miss Hazel. Good morning, Meredith. Are we doing the Willow lesson again today? We are. But today you are going to teach it. Meredith looked up. Me? Yes. Now? Yes. The younger children turned around in their seats to look at her. Meredith stood up slowly. She walked to the front of the room. Hazel handed her the piece of chalk. Meredith looked at the diagram on the board. She looked at the 7 small faces waiting. She took a breath. She began. The willow, she said, is not afraid of water. She drew a small arrow. The willow is the daughter of water. The willow is the granddaughter of water. When the ground is drowning, the willow does not run away. It goes deeper. It sends its roots down and it drinks. And then it changes the ground itself. Because the ground is what the ground is. Until you teach it something new. She stopped. She looked at Hazel. Hazel nodded. Meredith continued. On the back wall of the schoolhouse, above the reading corner, hung 4 small wood-carved portraits in a row. The first was of an old woman, with silver hair in a braid, standing by a creek. Under the portrait, a small brass plate read, Winona Redfeather, teacher. The second was of a woman in a canvas jacket, standing in a field of small trees. Della Ainsworth, teacher. The third was of a young woman, with her hair tied back with baling twine, holding a bundle of cuttings. Hazel Ainsworth, teacher. The fourth frame was empty, waiting. Above all 4, carved into a single beam of oak, ran 7 words. Trust the water. Trust each other. Pass it on. Meredith finished her lesson. The small children clapped. She sat back down. Hazel walked to the window. She looked out. Beyond the schoolhouse, all the way to the horizon, ran mile after mile of willow. Along every creek. Along every drainage. Along every low place in the county. Silver green in the morning light. Shimmering like water finally, at last, in the right place. At the end of a lane, in a small farmhouse with a blue-painted porch, a man named Edmund Ainsworth was helping an old woman named Ophelia hang out the wash. He was 47 years old now. He came out every Wednesday. He stayed for supper. He had learned to make a fair pie. In a farmhouse 2 counties over, a boy named Toby Thorne, 12 years old now, was walking through his grandfather's fields, with a bundle of cuttings under his arm. His grandfather Cyrus walked beside him with a cane, talking about which low places to plant next, talking softly, almost tenderly, the way a grandfather talks to a boy he loves. And in Hollow Creek County, in a schoolhouse on a hill, a young woman stood at a window and looked out at a green horizon and thought about her grandmother. 58 years, Hazel thought. 58 years Della had been afraid. And it had only taken 1 girl, 1 bundle of sticks, 1 line of women in aprons, 1 long, slow morning of the whole county walking up the lane, to end that fear forever. Behind her, at the front of the room, a 15-year-old girl was taking questions from a class of 2nd graders. Hazel put her hand on the window glass. "Grandma," she whispered, "look,